Yo, how is it going, Bears fans? Welcome back to another episode of Bear Down Positional Review, where we talk everything Bears every day of the week. Do you expect an improvement out of David Montgomery in 2020? And will the Bears utilize a fullback next season? We're going to be answering these questions and many more in episode 2 of our Positional Review series. Today we've got the running backs. Welcome back to the show, guys. Before I introduce myself and my co-hosts, I want to say thank you guys so much for 1.2K subs. We're continuing to grind. I guess we're pushing for 2K now. It might come a little bit sooner than we expect, but we're continuing to grind, and it's a lot of fun. We're having fun with this, so thank you guys so much for tuning in. Do us a favor and subscribe. Click the bell for notifications so you can find out when we're posting more Bears content, and like the video. So, as I said, running back positional review today. Welcome to the show. I am your host, Chris Malpe. Today, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Parth and Jaylen McClinton. How's it going, guys?
Going good. Just a little gloomy day here in Chicago, so it's been a gloomy day, I guess.
It's going great. I wish I could say it was gloomy. It's 104 degrees right now in Arizona. Other than that, it's pretty good.
Yeah, definitely a gloomy day here in Chicago. You know, rain on the ground, not much to do. We're in quarantine, but it's not the worst thing of all time. We are also joined today by editor-in-chief on BearDown.com. Welcome back to the show, Justin Chu. How's it going, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back again.
Absolutely. So today we're going to be breaking down the running back position for you guys, similar to how we did it with the quarterback positional review, you know, talking about each player in specific, and then answering some questions at the end. So let's hop right into it, you know. David Montgomery, I mean, there's no better spot to start than there. He had 889 yards on 242 touches last year behind what easily was one of the worst offensive lines in the league. It's his second year out of Iowa State in 2020. He also caught 25 passes for 185 yards and a touchdown in 2019. You know, the Bears have been looking for that receiving back. Other than Tarik Cohen, you know, they brought in Mike Davis in 2019. That didn't really pan out. But Montgomery served as a pretty decent receiving piece out of the backfield. He's a truly underrated receiving back. 1,074 total yards on the season behind one of the worst lines in the league. I think that's pretty impressive. Justin, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on David Montgomery heading into the 2020 season?
I think the success or failure for David Montgomery is really going to come down to how the offensive line performs. I mean, I'm not saying that David Montgomery is not a talented prospect or wasn't a talented prospect coming out of Iowa State. Like, obviously, the Bears saw enough in him that they ended up trading up in order to take him in that third round. Was it second or third?
It was the third round.
Third.
Yeah, the third in the third round. But barring the fact that, like, you know, unless you're like an once-in-a-lifetime talent, like, you need your offensive line. And last time that we talked about quarterbacks and, like, declining quarterback play, the running back position really is dependent on that too. So hopefully, you know, the ceiling's really high depending on how the Bears end up retooling their offensive line. And I think that if they do so, then David Montgomery is going to have a breakout season, and he's going to become like a mainstay piece on offense. I mean, you saw what they did with Jordan Howard. You saw what they did with Tarik Cohen when there was that sort of consistency. But, you know, running backs cannot survive in the league without a consistent offensive line.
You know what they say is that a running back is a quarterback's best friend. A good running game obviously would help here in Chicago, especially to free up all the weapons that the Bears end up having now on offense following the additions of Darnell Mooney, Ted Ginn, Trevor Davis. We'll see what happens with him. And obviously having Anthony Miller, someone who's had some shoulder injuries in the past, healthy, it would be nice to free up some opportunities for guys like those. It's interesting, you know, because you mentioned that the Bears traded up for David Montgomery. He's someone who was high on their draft board back there in the 2019 NFL Draft. Really known for breaking his tackles. I mean, we posted a mixtape of him a couple days ago, and I saw some comments that were like, wow, what terrible holes that the offensive line is creating. And you really saw him breaking tackles in order to gain yards, and I think that's really his staple when it comes to his game. And it's something that does absolutely remind me of Jordan Howard, and I really hope the Bears can get him more implemented in their game plan this year. Parth, I'm going to pass it to you. What do you think as far as David Montgomery goes heading into his sophomore season in the league?
I'm excited to see what he can do. We recently had Prince on the show, and Prince said, well, Prince couldn't recall his name, which was funny, but Prince also said that he works just as hard as Saquon Barkley, shows Saquon Barkley type talent. So I'm excited to see what David Montgomery can show. I think he can break out this year. That's definitely going to break for 1,000 yards. He also was sixth in breaking the most tackles, second as a rookie. So I'm excited to see him just progress his game. I know a lot of fans aren't as excited about Montgomery, but you can't put all the blame on him. The offensive line was terrible last year. Nagy was terrible with play calling. I think that goes unnoticed, but Nagy did not run the ball as much as we expected him to do, which definitely hurt David Montgomery a lot last year. So, I'm excited to see where he can grow.
Obviously, we saw Josh Jacobs with the Raiders with the pick that we traded them for Khalil Mack have a really good season, but I really don't think you can underestimate what David Montgomery was able to accomplish behind such a porous offensive line in 2019. Jaylen, what do you think about really understand me, as they call him, heading into the 2020 season?
So this is actually kind of funny. So when we first, took him, I had a reactions video to that. I wasn't the very happy person on the world. I was kind of upset that we took him, but now that I look back at it, that I'm a huge fan of David Montgomery. His story. His story is crazy. He lost his brother to jail and stuff like that. So he's always been a person who works hard to get done what he wants done. In the 4 games though, he had over 20 carries. We went 3-1. In the last game of the season against the Vikings, he pretty much carried the offense. He had 113 yards and 1 touchdodown and a crazy play that he literally carried.
Carried the offense.
Carried the Viking, most of the Vikings defenders into the end zone, which is probably one of his best plays of the whole season. For him to have over 1,000, all-purpose yards with this terrible O-line that we had last year is crazy. Other than Anthony Miller, he's probably the person, the player that I see to have the biggest 2020 season or to break out, stuff like that. So I'm definitely a big fan of David Montgomery. I expect him to have a big season in 2020, definitely.
It's interesting that you brought up that play against the Vikings because Vikings fans would probably blame that on that being their secondary, their second stringers playing. But it's crazy because he carried 4 players in on that play. Yeah, no kidding. In the 6th most broken tackles in the league, that's impressive as a rookie, regardless. So a 3rd-round pick coming out of Iowa State, David Montgomery is set to do some very big things in 2020. Jaylen, I find it interesting. I feel like you had a similar reaction to the Roquan Smith pick as you did the David Montgomery pick, and now you love the both of them.
Exactly. I don't know. Maybe I'm gonna just let Pace do what he does. I'm gonna have a very cordial response to all the draft picks. Definitely.
Absolutely. So heading on to the next running back, this is really one that leads to a big question mark in Chicago. We've got Tarik Cohen. His best season came in 2018. He rushed for 444 yards and 3 touchdowns. As I mentioned earlier, he was really the premier receiving back with Jordan Howard still in Chicago there in 2018. 725 yards and 5 touchdowns for him in the air in 2018. He had a little bit of a down year in 2019, and I don't even think it was a little bit of a down year. I think it was really a flop compared to what we saw in his rookie year. 213 rushing yards, no scores. He had 8 more catches and almost 300 less receiving yards and 2 less touchdowns, so ended up with 3 receiving touchdowns for 456 yards. Justin, I'm going to bring it back to you. Obviously, Cohen's future in Chicago is something that's questionable. We've already started dealing with a lot of the 2017 draft picks, declined Trubisky's 5th-year option, gave Eddie Jackson an extension. Cohen's probably the next big piece that the Bears need to figure out, and we'll talk about whether or not he's going to be in the team past 2020 later on. But heading into 2020, what do you expect out of him after a down year in 2019?
I think we can definitely see that
defense has figured it out.
Sorry, say again?
I said defense has figured him out.
Oh yeah. I think it just comes down to how they can use him creatively. And obviously I know 2018, 2 years ago, but this has been a good learning experience, I feel for Matt Nagy and his coaching staff, because this gives them the opportunity to look at the game film from 2019 and ask themselves okay, how should we have used these players that were, supposedly underutilized? And I think that A big key area in which they finally addressed that was like, for example, tight end. Like they're going to retool like how they're going to use tight ends and hopefully get more production. And I think the same happens for Tarik Cohen. Like we've seen kind of a glimpse, I feel like, into what their strategy is going to be this upcoming season. And I think that the underlying word there is just speed. Like we saw that with the Darnell Mooney pick. And if Darnell Mooney and Tarik Cohen can really hit their stride together, I think that like these offensive specialists are going to be extremely difficult to catch. And hopefully they'll use this as a learning experience to re-engineer, don't fix something that isn't broken,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at also even Ted Ginn. I mean, obviously he's 35 years old, ran a 4.28 40-yard dash at the 2007 NFL Combine, but he's even shown that he can still take the top off a defense when healthy there in New Orleans with the Saints and Drew Brees. And I think that Cohen does need to be used a little bit more productively in 2020. I like that you brought up that they can rewatch some film and try and rework his routes and how he plays his game. He's so dangerous there in the open field. I feel like he swayed a little bit towards the sideline a little bit too much last year, especially on run plays. I think we tried to give him the ball a little bit too much last season. So that's an interesting point as well. But Parth, I'm going to pass it to you now. What do you think about Tarik Cohen heading into 2020?
So we saw him regress a lot this past year, but it wasn't just all his fault. Once again, like Montgomery wasn't as great, but neither was Cohen. And it goes back to the offensive line, the quarterback play, the whole offense itself regressed. You can't blame Tarik fully, but yes, last year was definitely a poor year. His average yards per catch was 5.8, and he was 10.2 in 2018, so that took a dip. So we definitely need to see him do much better this upcoming season. And I think that starts with bringing in all these speed demons. Like you said, we brought in Taylor Davis, we brought in Ted Ginn, we brought in Darnell Mooney, which is going to take off the focus off Tarik Cohen a lot more. So we got a lot of guys that can take the top off the defense now, which defense will have to put attention to those guys, which can also help free up Tarik Cohen, which is going to definitely help him. And I feel like the Bears underutilized Tarik Cohen a lot of the times. We did a ton of halfback dives, that called him that, and just run up the middle with Tarik, which doesn't work. You gotta run some outside zone plays. Let him line up as a receiver in the slot. So we definitely need to figure out how to play Cohen, and I feel like we could see some big things. And talking about his future, it's up in the air right now. It just depends on how 2020 goes, I guess.
Yeah, I like that you brought up his value as a receiver. He's someone who I think we can all agree is more valuable as a receiver thanks to his size, someone who's great in the open field. And it should be interesting. I kind of think of it like the Khalil Mack situation on defense. Khalil Mack was the only pass rusher that was producing last year. And on offense, when Taylor Gabriel went down, Tarik Cohen was really the only, quote, speed demon that was able to do things on offense. And it allowed defenses to put more attention on him, similar to how offensive lines put more attention on Khalil Mack when Leonard Floyd wasn't really producing. So that's an interesting point you bring up as well, and I think that's a pretty solid comparison. Jaylen, I'm going to pass it to you. What do you think about Tarik Cohen heading into 2020?
Once again, I'm a huge fan of Tarik Cohen. I wouldn't consider him a running back. He's more of a weapon than a running back. For him to be 5'6" and have over 725 yards and 5 touchdowns in one season is like crazy. That's how much of a weapon he is. I feel like Nagy should definitely utilize him more this season. Last season, like Parth said, he was giving him, halfback dives on the goal line for a person who's 5'6", like a $190. That's not very smart at all.
Yeah.
You should start moving him on, halfback tosses where he uses his speed and get to the outside, because he's a very fast player. He's a good punt returner. He got all pro, in returning the ball in 2018. So if we utilize him like he's supposed to be used, I could see, us getting that 2018 Tarik back.
That's absolutely what we need, that 2018 Tarik Cohen. No one really knows who the running back 3 is going to be in Chicago. Ryan Nall is still on the roster. He spent some time on the practice squad. Artavis Pierce is also there, an undrafted free agent. And then we recently spoke to FIU's Napoleon Maxwell. That podcast will be coming out, or will already be out before you see this one, so go check that one out if you want. We got a chance to interview him. But, Justin, I'm going to ask you our first question. Who do you think serves as the running back 3 in 2020?
Honestly, you're absolutely correct. It's like a really up-in-the-air type situation. But I honestly think that Ryan Nall has a good chance of of becoming the running back 3. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like what you see kind of in Ryan Nall, like obviously looking at college tape of him when he's at Oregon State, is that he's a big-bodied like running back. And when we look at like David Montgomery and we look at Tarik Cohen, like they're not bruiser-style running backs. Obviously, David Montgomery is like he seeks out contact, but his main game is being extremely shifty. Like you see kind of this fluidity when he runs. And with Ryan Nall, you kind of see this like bruiser style, like, and Jaylen said this before the show, like this fullback type running back. And I think it gives him like the perfect hybrid of this big running back, kind of what we saw with Jordan Howard in 2018, and kind of giving them a complement of like this 1-2 punch. Like we can beat you on the ground, running right up the middle, or we can beat you with like a short, shallow cut with Tarik Cohen, and obviously this point with David Montgomery. So I honestly think that Ryan Nall takes that running back 3 spot, but we're going to have to wait and see.
I think Ryan Nall takes it as well, frankly. You know, you look at his career in Chicago. He's been in the league for a couple of years, 6'2", 239. He's only rushed for 8 yards in his career in Chicago as far as regular season games go. We've seen him be able to do some stuff as far as in the preseason. I know some people have liked him a lot. You know, we've talked about how much we like Deion Bush in the preseason. Ryan Nall's another target that has gotten some decent playing there in the preseason, and I've really liked him a lot. Once again, you know, you mentioned it earlier, he's kind of a fullback style running back. I think he could be a great third down running back, you know, give David Montgomery some air, punch Ryan Nall up the middle on 3rd and 1, and I probably would trust him to get it. So that's someone I'm going to pick as well as the one that's going to win the eventual RB3 contest. You know, Artavis Pierce is also another polished product that I like a lot, but runs similar to that of kind of a blend of Tarik Cohen and David Montgomery. Parth, I'm going to pass it to you next. Who do you think is RB3 in Chicago in 2020?
I have to agree with you guys and say Ryan Nall. I don't know much about Artavis Pierce or what's it called, Napoleon Maxwell. I'm just going to say that right now. So I know more about Ryan Nall. I just feel like he's been on the team for a couple of years now. He's known the system. He's been here. He knows the culture. He knows how this thing works. And he's been a great player in preseason. I don't understand why we haven't used him more in the actual regular season games. You know, the 2 carries he's gotten, it definitely should be more. I feel like Nagy just does not use running back. Like, I'm not trying to slander Nagy here, but he
doesn't like running the ball.
And it's something we need to change because it definitely doesn't help the quarterback. I mean, Trubisky isn't the greatest quarterback to just keep throwing 40, 30, 35, 40 passes a game. So we need to get our running backs 20, 25 carries. And, you know, we can mix it up with Ryan Nall. I mean, we had Mike Davis here last year, and we didn't even use him. We cut him in a couple of weeks, which was surprising too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ryan Nall, someone who's an interesting prospect there, can be used in a couple of different ways, but Nagy, I'm sure, could get creative with him. Justin mentioned that he went to Oregon State. Jaylen, I'm pretty sure before the show you were talking about who you want to be the RB3 in 2020. Another Oregon State prospect. Jaylen, give me your running back 3 for 2020.
So like you said, I'm going with the Oregon State prospect too, but it's not Ryan Nall. You know, I like Ryan Nall. I like how, you know, he came into the league undrafted and was able to you know, stay on our roster for the last couple seasons. But I'm gonna have to go with Artavis Pierce here. Like I said before, he also went to Oregon State last season. In his senior season, he rushed for 873 yards, 6 yards per attempt with 6 touchdowns, and he had 169 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. So he had 7 all-purpose touchdowns last season. I just feel like, you know, he's basically a bigger Tarik Cohen. He's 5'11" compared to Tarik's 5'6". So, you know, he can probably get more carries than Tarik will due to, like, the size and durability. I just feel like, you know, he could be a better option, especially if Tarik doesn't be on the roster in 2021. Absolutely. We will have basically Tarik 2.0, who's taller, you know, cheaper because he's undrafted compared to Tarik, you know, being a draft pick in the 4th round. So I'm going to have to go with Artavis Pierce here.
That's an interesting point you bring up with Tarik not being on the team, and that's a perfect segue into our next question. You know, the good thing about Nall is that he is 6'2". He can really be a bruiser, like Justin said. Tarik Cohen's future really is up for doubts, I guess you could say, in Chicago. You know, we mentioned he had a down year in 2019, 8 more catches, 2 less touchdowns, way less receiving yards. Really a down year for the offense as a whole, and you must think that probably contributed to Tarik Cohen's down year a little bit. But Justin, I want to ask you, obviously I mentioned earlier that the Bears have agreed to an extension with Eddie Jackson. You know, they made their decision on Mitchell Trubisky, and we'll see where that goes, but a decision has been made, at least for now, that he won't be returning. Obviously, we got to see how that one plays out. Tarik Cohen's like that last oddball that we needed to make a decision on, other than obviously Anthony Miller. Do you think Tarik remains on the team and gets in his extension to be on the Bears past 2020?
You know, honestly, I don't think that he's going to be on the roster. And given just kind of the turnover that we've seen on offense with a lot of the weapons, you know, if indeed Tarik Cohen kind of, you know, has been figured out, like the biggest question is like, okay, then what other roles can he serve on the team? And obviously in 2018, we saw him as a punt returner and a kick returner. But I think in 2019, like the Cordero Patterson pickup was actually huge. And, you know, it was on every highlight tape last year. Like when we're looking at the Bears, like Cordero Patterson's incredible return against the Saints, like there's still like juice left where Cordero Patterson plays. And obviously like he could be utilized as both a wide receiver and, you know, in some odd scenarios as a running back as well. So if depending on both of their production next year, I'd put my money on the fact that Tarik Cohen most likely will not be on the roster in 2021. Yeah,
I mean, if you look at Cordero Patterson in New England in 2018, he had 21 receptions for 247 yards and 3 touchdowns. You have to think that the Bears can use him more creatively. You know, only 11 receptions for 83 yards in 2019 for him in his first year in Chicago. Those guys are both in contract years. I would much rather sign Cordero Patterson personally, and I do not think that Tarik Cohen gets an extension in Chicago. You know, Jaylen recently mentioned Artavis Pierce being a good replacement for him. Cordero can be used all over the place, can serve as both the kick returner and the punt returner. He's only 29 years old, one of the best punt returners, special teamers of all time. You know, he made the all-decade team after coming out of the 2013 NFL Draft from Tennessee. We're not here to talk about Cordero, though. We're here to talk about Tarik. So, Parth, I'm going to pass it to you. Do you think that Tarik Cohen is on the team past 2020?
I'm going to say it depends on the price tag. It really just depends on how this year goes and how the price tag. If he plays like 2018 Tarik, his price tag is definitely going to be higher than you think, like probably like $5-6 million, which the Bears might not be willing to pay. But if it's like a couple million, I don't see Ryan Pace not keeping him on the team just to keep him for depth. I mean, if he plays like last year, I doubt he gets anything more than $3 or $4 million. I'm just gonna put that out there because he is an RB2, RB3. He's not ever gonna be an RB1 just because of his height and his size. But going back to, I know we're talking about Tarik, but going back to Cordero, he can also play running back for this team. Against the Packers with the Patriots, I'm pretty sure he put up 100+ yards, and he's shown to play great. He's shown he can play running back, and I feel like the Bears could also use him at running back and make him RB3 and save a roster spot. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the amount of speed that this team has, you're assuming that there's many players that we can put in different positions and get creative with that. Yeah. And Cordero's only one of those pieces. The more I think about it, the more I'm starting to like that idea that Jaylen brought up with Artavis Pierce. And not only that, I mean, like, there's just a ton of running backs on this roster. And Justin mentioned it, but defenses are starting to figure out Cohen, and the price tag might be a little expensive. So, Jaylen, I'm going to pass it to you and ask, do you think Tarik Cohen will be a Bear past the 2020 season?
I'm a basically say what Parth said. You know, to me, it all depends on how much he's asking for. For this whole 2017 draft class in general, you know, we did decline Mitchell's fifth-year option. So depending on how his season goes, you know, we might have to re-sign him. Anthony Miller's coming up soon. James Daniel, Roquan too. So if he asks for too much money, then as much as it would hate for me to see it, I would have to let him walk here. That's why I said that's why I feel like Ryan Pace bringing in Artavis Pierce. You know, even if he doesn't make the roster this year, he's probably going to be in the practice squad, make the roster next year if we let Tarik go. So, yeah, to me, it all depends on the price tag. If he's asking for too much, let him walk. If he's not, then of course bring him back.
You got to look at it, and you got to see that Ryan Pace really hit on the Tarik Cohen pick, and I think his team would probably try and use that 2018 season where he had 725 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns as leverage for him to get a little bit more money. and sometimes it's not always about that. So that's really an interesting one. We've got 2 more questions. The first one, Justin, I'm going to go to you. You know, obviously the Bears didn't do a ton to address their offensive line this offseason. You know, they signed Jason Spriggs. They signed Jermaine Fetty, 2 former high-round picks that might be able to find some grounding here in Chicago. You know, they're going to move Jermaine Fetty back to guard. That seems interesting. Jason Spriggs, someone who's been pretty productive when he stays healthy. They also obviously re-signed Rashad Coward, drafted in the 7th round, Arlington Hambright, and Lachavious Simmons. Behind this offensive line, do you expect to see an improvement out of David Montgomery in 2020?
Sorry, I didn't catch that last part. Can you say that again?
Do you expect an improvement out of David Montgomery?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think that offensive line was definitely one of those big question marks all throughout the 2019 season. And at this point, if they haven't worked to, iron out some of those difficulties that they saw in 2019, then, absolutely not. David Montgomery wouldn't. But, knowing Matt Nagy, knowing, how creative they can be as professionals, at their job, I think that David Montgomery definitely breaks 1,000. And also, with the additions of, the wide receivers and tight ends, I feel like a lot of defenses now are going to have to account for that. Cole Kmet, Darnell Mooney, obviously Allen Robinson coming back, Anthony Miller, those guys, they're not jokes, and defenses are going to have to account for that. And so I feel like that's going to take off a lot of stress on that run game. So it'll be a very balanced system, at least in my opinion. I hope that's what's going to happen, but we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, it doesn't only take stress off of the receivers, it takes stress off the quarterback, and overall makes a much better, well-oiled system there. I think David Montgomery breaks 1,000 rushing yards in 2020, no doubt. The Bears obviously didn't focus and completely hone in on the offensive line in 2020 in the offseason, but something they did do is they brought in Juan Castillo, someone who's really did a good job at providing some good run schemes in the past. He's now the run game coordinator in Chicago, following the firing of Harry Hiestand and Mark Helfrich. Mark Helfrich, unfortunately, never really ran a professional offense until he came into Chicago. I'm not too sure what was up with Hiestand because he's one of the greatest offensive line coaches to ever exist in football, so that's a tough one there. But I'm excited to see what Castillo can do, and I really think it's going to be an improvement in 2020 for David Montgomery. Parth, what do you think?
He's an improved. There's no doubt about it. And you just said what I wanted to say about Castillo. Bringing Castillo in definitely is going to help, Matt Nagy and David Montgomery. The problem with, Mark Helfrich and Harry Hiestand was they never actually got along with Matt Nagy. They had the different play calling issues. It just a lot of heads button. And bringing Castillo definitely brings familiarity with Nagy's offense, and I think that will also help Montgomery out with the plays we run. And Montgomery is bound for success in this league. He's a guy who's worked hard his whole entire life. I just saw his agents tagged me in a video or sent me a video of him working out today, which is I thought really weird. But I saw that he's grinding out. He's taking his quarantine seriously. He's just a kid who works hard, and I think he can definitely take the next step in this league.
Absolutely, Jaylen. What do you think? Does Dave Montgomery improve in 2020?
Actually, both you and Parth, I was going to talk about how if Ryan Pace didn't fire, Mark Helfrich and Harry Hiestand, who were supposedly, supposed to be running our or the control of our run game, if Pace didn't fire him, I feel like he definitely felt like, David Montgomery should have had a way better rookie season than he had. He only averaged 3.5 yards per carry, which is not that good at all. So I feel like he's going to have over 1,000 yards. Like I said earlier, I feel like he's definitely going to be a breakout candidate for me. I definitely think he can get over 1,000 yards, maybe 9 touchdowns, 400 receiving yards, stuff like that. I definitely think he's going to have a big 2020 season.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've got one more question, and this one's going to be exclusively to Justin because we're getting around the 30-minute mark now, and he had a really good point when he brought this up earlier. So obviously we're not going to make a fullback episode. The Bears have never been a team to bring in a traditional fullback in that sense, but Justin was talking about, tight ends, possibly earlier he brought up Ryan Nall being someone who could fill in there at a fullback position. So, Justin, I'm going to ask you, do you think the Bears have a traditional fullback in 2020? And if not, what type of players can they use to kind of fill that gap and play the fullback position?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they have a traditional fullback. I mean, that's not really a question. I really think that the traditional fullback position absolutely is a dying breed in the NFL. However, like there are outliers that still exist, like Kyle Juszczyk, James Devlin. Obviously, he retired for the New England Patriots, but Juszczyk is really that last pure fullback that exists in the league. I think if the Bears were to go with like a fullback option, try to use offensive sets that actually require like a fullback, I would not be surprised if one of the tight ends that are on the roster serve that role. Because, I mean, good fullbacks, like traditionally in the league, are obviously good blockers, but also in times of like goal line or short yardage plays, like they have to be able to either eat up yards like in short yardage situations or be able to catch out of the backfield. And tight ends are, I mean, they're obviously well above average pass catchers, but they also have that size where they can eat up yards. And so I would not be surprised if one of the tight ends that are on the roster ends up filling that role.
Yeah, I mean, you look at guys like Demetrius Harris, who are known for their blocking, someone that you can throw back there to provide some extra blocking, and guys like a J.P. Holtz, Ryan Nall, someone we mentioned earlier. But that's a really interesting discussion that we may have another day. Thank you guys for tuning in. You know, guys, I think we talked about this being much shorter than the quarterback position review, but I think it was longer, or about the same length.
Yeah,
so
about the same, yeah.
That'll pretty much do it for this one, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. If you want more content from us, head over to beardown.com. You can find the links to all of our social media down in the description. And you can also follow the podcast on Instagram at beardown and also on Twitter. Justin, Parth, and Jaylen, any last words?
Let's get this run game going this year, you know? Tired of seeing 30 passes from Mitch, not gonna lie. No, just a balanced offense works. We saw what the Vikings did. You know, just keep it balanced.
All right, well, I think that's pretty much going to do it for this one, guys. Quarantine still another God knows how many days in Illinois. Looks like it's still going to be another 25 days for us, but we're sticking in there. We're making content for you guys, and we really like that you guys appreciate it as much as we do because we're putting a lot into it. We're really having fun with it. Thank you guys, as always. And as always, Chicago, stay safe and bear down. Peace.